couple of other things I just wanted to flag before we get into the DFG returns that are available for you now. So the first is a home adaptation feedback form. So quite a lot of local authorities have their own feedback form, and quite a lot of local authorities don't have any feedback form at all. But I couldn't find any local authorities that had a feedback form where they could compare their feedback with others and kind of do a bit of benchmarking in terms of what their applicants or kind of clients think about the service. So we've set up a free form for you to use. So if you as a local authority want to direct your kind of clients or applicants to this form, it's completely free and available on the Adapt My Home site to use. They can click Start Feedback, and they can pop in an address or a postcode. We just use the postcode so it identifies which local authority you're based in. So that's our office postcode. You pop in dates when the adaptations were completed, and then it goes through some questions in terms of what sort of works they had done, how long the process took from kind of the client's perspective, whether they felt informed through the process, whether they felt listened to, whether the works were completed to a reasonable standard and in a reasonable time. Outcomes, so have the adaptations helped? How have they helped? And additionally, you can add some extra comments in. So how do you rate the experience? And some optional feedback questions there. So click continue. That's submitted into the database, and if you want to sign up and want to use it, let us know, and every quarter we'll send you a report that gives you your own feedback and also compares it to others either regionally or nationally. So if you're interested in that, please do get in touch. And the other thing that we've set up, which was part of the conference that we did in Manchester at the start of July, is introduce the Home Adaptations in Social Housing Charter. And a big part of the day was looking at the relationship between local authorities and housing associations, and recognising that both are trying to support tenants, but quite often the relationship between the two can be difficult. So what we set out was this charter, 10 fairly similar promises from local authorities to housing associations and from housing associations to local authorities. So things like having a name contact, working towards and accepting landlord-led applications, having a warranty on equipment, and then supporting tenants with that equipment after the end of the warranty. So those sort of things are the 10 promises from each party to the other. And once a number of local authorities and housing associations have signed up already, but once they've signed up, they can also use our standard forms that allow local authorities to ask permission or get the consent of housing associations, and also to inform them when tenants make an inquiry, and equally for housing associations to either return that consent or make a landlord application. So again, those forms are all free and available on our website now. So if you're interested in those, please do get in touch. But as I said before, our main topic this afternoon is looking at the DFG return. So hopefully a lot of you will have signed up and be able to access the return. And I'll bring Emily in from MHCLG in a few minutes. So if you've got any issues with actually accessing the return, Emily will be able to help us work out what to do with those. But DFG return, it's the set of questions or data return that local authorities are asked to submit to Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government every year. prior to this year was called Delta. So if you've heard that before, this is the new version of the Delta return, and it was called Delta because that was the system that it used. So it doesn't use the Delta system anymore, hence it's not called Delta anymore, just the DFG return. So we've got the guide on the website. So if you want to refer to this afterwards, it's in the guide section of the website under DFG return. And the deadline for submissions this year is the 18th of September. So what's that? Exactly a month away. And what the return does, it asks local authorities to report on how they've spent their DFG allocation. And this was in the year 2025-2026, so the year that ended 31st of March this year. And it's asking you about any mandatory DFGs that you awarded using the allocation that come under the Housing Grants Construction and Regeneration Act, and any discretionary grants and loans that you may have awarded under your local housing assistance policy. So even though the form refers to DFG throughout, it's kind of about how you've used the funding. So it does include any discretionary grants that you've delivered, not just DFGs under the Act. So all those things should be included in your return. But there is one separate question about any adaptations funded through your housing revenue account if you've got any retained stock. So that the adaptations to those properties don't come out of your DFG allocation, but there is one question that covers those. And just to note that if you're in a county area, the DFG return is done by the district council or the tier 2 authority. And if you need any help completing the form or understanding the questions after today, there is a link here to our DFG returns mailbox at Foundation. So if you need any help understanding any of these questions after today, then please do contact that email address by the contact the team form, and they will endeavour to help you with your question. And also on the page you can get a full list of the questions in PDF form if you want to go through them before you start answering on the online system. So then in terms of getting yourself ready to submit the return, last year there were 3 main queries of your kind of DFG system or database, and this year there's an extra query. So there are 4 sets of data that answer the majority of the questions. So the first one is a query of every case on your system where the assessment was completed during the reporting year. So what it's mean is you've received a referral from social services. So this is a housing return. So it's all cases that you had recorded during the year where the first date was you received a referral or an assessment from social care. The second is all the applications that were submitted during the year. So every case you've got on your system where the formal application for DFG was made during the year. Third query was all the cases on your system where a grant was approved during the year. And the fourth one was, is, all cases on your system where the grant was completed or kind of the certified date of the grant was completed during the reporting year. And if you want a little bit more detail on those match the key stages of delivery set out in the DFG guidance. And it's the same stages that have been used for previous year's surveys, so that we can kind of compare and kind of track activity and progress over the years. And just for avoidance of doubt, the reporting period is 1st of April 2025 to 31st of March 2026. So those are the 4 queries, and in the boxes below, we've got a list of the fields that you would then need additionally within those queries to answer them. So for all referrals received during the year, it's quite a simple one. It's the date of receipt of that referral or assessment. For the second query, which is all the applications made during the year, you're looking at the date of the application and also the date of the referral from query one, so you can calculate the time difference between receiving a referral or an assessment and the date when the application was made. The query 3 has a few more fields. So again, the date fields, whether you deferred any payments. I'll come on to what that means if you don't understand about deferred payments, and details from the means test. That all comes within query 3. And then most of the fields are actually in query 4. So it's about all cases that were completed during that reported year. So including the dates, plus age of the disabled person, ethnicity, whether they were veteran status, common types of home adaptations, whether there were works to common parts, the value of the grant, tenure, whether the landlord made the application, and whether there are any land charges associated with those grants, or the value of the land charges associated with those grants. So those are the 4 queries, which we will refer to as we go through the process. So first section of the form is local housing assistance policies and demographics. So this first one you can answer without using any of the queries. So this is probably hopefully the simplest question to answer on the form. So you'll be asked about your local housing assistance policy. First, whether you have one. So if you tick no, that you don't have one, you can ignore the next bit. But if you've got one, it asks you to put in the link to your policy, if you've got that published online, and when it was last updated. So you should only answer yes to having a policy if it's formally adopted and currently in use. So if you've got one in the process of being revised at the moment, include the date and the link for the existing version that's live on your website, and report the new one next time. And one of the really useful bits of this is we've got a repository, a library of all the local housing assistance policies published across the country that we update every year, and then we can run reports and do research in terms of how those change and what they include. So for instance, the last Foundations Live was about motor neurone disease, and using that repository of housing assistance policies, we're able to go through and see how many featured grants for either palliative cases or MND specifically. So that particularly for us, that's a really useful question. And as well, if you look on the Foundation's website, we've got a guide to writing a housing assistance policy. And from this data, there's analysis of how councils across England have used their discretionary powers. So again, if you're compiling a new policy, then you can use that analysis to compare and contrast how your policy compares to others across England. So the second part of this kind of policy and demographics section is about the demographics of your applicants or completed grant applicants from last year. And this one is done using query 4. So this is based on the grants that were completed, and it asks you, first of all, whether you hold this data. If you do, then it asks you to say it's kind of numbers in terms of age groups, ethnic background, and veteran status. So again, I think those are relatively straightforward. So the next section is on case flows, and this one probably gets a little bit more complicated because you're using all of the all 4 queries. So it's basically first it's kind of case counts is the first part of this section. So using query 1, how many cases entered stage 2? So it's basically how many referrals or assessments did you as a housing team get from social services or OTs during the last financial year? So any cases that came to you as a referral or an assessment, you count those for cases entering stage 2. Then the next one is, so completing stage 2, entering stage 3 is how many cases was a formal DFG applied for during the year. Then completed stage 3 is how many cases were approved, how many grant applications or loan applications, or if you're using your discretion, were actually approved during the year. And then completed stage 4 is basically completion of the job. So what it's looking for is how many referrals you got, how many applications you then made, how many of those applications were then, or how many applications were approved, and how many jobs were completed. So it's not the number of jobs that moved through all those stages in the year. It's the number of cases that hit that benchmark or that point or that milestone in the process during the year. So how many referrals you got, how many applications were made, how many approvals were given, how many jobs were completed. And then after the numbers, for those same kind of 3 time periods, it asks you to calculate the mean number of working days. So it's not calendar days, which make your figures look longer. It's the mean number of working days took to complete each stage of the process. So first one is mean number of working days for all the cases that you made an application or had an application for during the year. How long did they take on average between you getting the referral and the application being made? Then what was the mean number of working days between the application being made and the approval being given? And then finally, what was the mean number of working days between the approval being given and the works being completed? 3 time periods completes that section. And the other bit that it asks you for as part of this is how many approvals that you made did you defer payment for? So this is not particularly common, but some local authorities do use it, and it comes in handy if you run out of funds during the year. So if you've run out of funds in say December, what the kind of good practice and the guidance says that you shouldn't stop approving. You should approve them, but you should have a note there that payment will be deferred until the next financial year, or up to a point up to 12 months away. So if you were in the position where you deferred any payments, you record that in this section. And it's the number of cases that were deferred. So the next section, and I can see a few questions coming in, so I'll come back to those at the end, see if we've got some common threads. So we've gone through numbers of cases moving through the stages and how long those stages took on average. The next section is on adaptation types, and it's based on the number of grants completed again in the year. So it's using that query number 4 on the number of grants you had completed during the year. And it's asking if you can, from your data, provide this information or not. I think roughly about 40% of local authorities completed this question last year. It's how many of these were done across all the grants that were completed last year. So bathroom adaptations and stair lifts were by far the most common last year. But it's not the main adaptation. So if you did a bathroom and a stair lift, for example, in the same grant, you would count both of those within this question. But again, if it's one of those, if you can't report on the adaptation type, you tick the box that says I cannot report on that and move on to the next question. But if you can, it's again really useful data to kind of think about what the grant's being spent on. Say mostly bathroom, stair lifts, and ramps, but other things have been like sensory rooms and have certainly been increasing in recent years, but again, really useful data for monitoring purposes. The next section is common parts, and this again uses query 4 on how many grants were completed during the year. So how many of those grants involved adaptations to the common part? So this is usually in blocks of flats or kind of communal dwellings. And it's shared access areas like entrances, hallways, stairwells, landings, external paths and ramps. Not always all that common, strangely, common parts adaptations, but again, really useful to know, and particularly with regard to the Equalities Act. But again, if you can't report on this, or it's not complete recorded in your data set, then you just tick no and move on to the next question. Next section is on grant values. And again, this is using query 4. So all the jobs that were completed in 2025, 2026 by the amount of grant or loan provided. So, and again, it covers, as I said at the start, mandatory DFGs and any discretionary grants or loans included in your housing assistance policy. And it includes these ranges, which they've been fairly consistent over the last 10 years or so, and again helps to show how the grant's being spent and kind of differences across the country. And I think this is the one, looking at a couple of the questions in terms of if you do 2 or 3 grants as part of the same job. I think what we would do, because there's a 30,000 over and section, 30,000 and over category. If you've got a mandatory DFG and a discretionary kind of top-up grant or loan as part of your housing assistance policy, then include them as one and count them here as £30,000 and over, rather than a 30,000 and a separate one. So it's looking at the value of that job rather than necessarily thinking of them as different grants if they're part and parcel of the same project. I would have thought everybody could report on grant values, but again, there is an option to tick no if you can't. Next section is on tenure and landlord applications. And again, this is using query 4, and it's broken down on the housing tenure of the occupants. So as hopefully you all know, the application is made by the owner or the tenant, which may be slightly different to the disabled person, but So we're looking at the types of applications that were made. So it could be owner-occupiers, private rented tenants, tenants of registered providers or housing associations, and occupiers of caravans or houseboats. So it asks you to break down your kind of query 4 in terms of how many jobs were completed by those 4 tenures. And then this is where there's the separate question, which is, I suppose, probably a 5th query in terms of how many homes were adapted for council tenants if you've still got your own retained stock. So that might be a completely different system or a completely different query, but this is the only question about council tenants and housing revenue account. So this section, so it's broken down, the main query is broken down into those 4 tenure types: owner-occupiers, private rented tenants, housing association tenants, and then occupiers of caravans and houseboats. And then there's a separate question about whether the landlord applied on behalf of their tenant. So whether it was a landlord's application as opposed to a tenant's application. So you could have, in the first part of the question, maybe 50 grants that were completed for housing association tenants, but maybe 40 of those the landlord applied on the tenant's behalf, or maybe it was none. But it's a slightly different question. So first part is the tenure of the occupants, and the second part was who made the application. And hopefully if you've been to Foundations events over the last couple of years, you'll know the landlord can make an application and that there are some different rules to how that applies. I won't go through all those now, but if you're interested in how that works, then please do get in touch. And so it's only cases where the landlord submitted the application and not the tenant. So next section is on means testing. And this is I suppose, fairly regular question, but there is a little bit more detail in it for this year. And this one is using query 3. So it's based on applications approved. So looking at the grants that were approved in 2025, 2026, how many of them weren't means tested because either A, it was an application for a disabled child, B, the other standard one, the disabled person was in receipt of one of the passporting benefits, C, because there's an exemption of some sort in your housing assistance policy. So either maybe you don't means test people up to a certain level of work, or you don't means test people with a life-limiting condition, for example, 2 fairly common examples. So that's this other exemption within your housing assistance policy. And there is a catch-all. So if there's any other reason that you don't, or people are exempted from the means test, you count those there, and there is space to provide a bit more explanation or narrative around that. And then the other question on means testing was the total value of the contributions in those grants that were approved where there was a contribution because of the means test. So maybe you did approved 100 grants last year. Say 90 of them were exempt from the means test. You record those in the first bit. 10 did have a means tested contribution. You give the total of those contributions, the total value of those contributions in the next part of the question. And as I said earlier, this applies to any mandatory DFGs, and if you do have a means test on discretionary grants or loans that you may have. And it's the applicant's contribution, so not the total cost of the works. It's asking what the applicant's contribution is following the means test. And again, as with most of the questions, if you can't report on this, you tick no. So nearly at the end now, getting there now. So next section is on local land charges, which is again back to query 4. So on all the adaptations that were completed during the year. So how many of those had a local land charge registered? So those are the cases if you apply a local land charge that are between £5,000 and £15,000 in value. And then the other question is how much you receive back as a local authority for people paying back their land charges if they had sold the property within 10 years. So that would be probably a separate query, probably a separate query from probably your local finance systems. So that one is probably separate from your grant system, but it's the total amount you receive back as a local authority during the year. And again, this is mandatory DFGs plus any discretionary grants and loans that are in your local policy, where you include a local land charge. And for charges registered, it's just cases that are completed during the year. And for redemptions, it's the amount of money that you got back in and was repaid during the year. So again, hopefully that one's fairly straightforward. And then this is the final section in terms of data questions. And it's asking for how much funding you had and how much you spent during the year. And it asks you to split down in terms of what you spent between home adaptations and other social care capital projects. So home adaptations includes your standard DFGs plus any discretionary grants and loans that are in your policy. And other social care capital projects is capital spend that is part of your Better Care Fund that's been used for some of the capital project that supports adult social care, but isn't part of your kind of home adaptation process. And this should give you total paid out during the financial year. So it's the total actually paid, spent, left your bank accounts, not works that were kind of approved or carried forward. Another just point to make: if grants had part payments in the previous years, or have got part payments in this year, only include what was actually spent in 25-26. Some cases might be easy to get this off your finance system, but it's all about actual spend during the financial year. And just to clarify, MHCLG will be asking a separate question from Tier 1 authorities next April about spend and underspend in this financial year. This question, as part of the DFG return, isn't anything to do with that. It's just part of the standard reporting back to government that 99% of local authorities did last year. So hopefully we can get somewhere near that again. The final section is on data quality and confidence. You'll be pleased to know there's no queries for this section. You're just asked to say how confident you are that this return is accurate and complete, from very confident to not at all confident. And there's a box to fill in if you've got any worries about your data. And then, I forgot, there was one final section on sharing information. So as I said, this is this data is completed by district authorities or kind of tier 2 or unitary authorities. And certainly for counties, Better Care Fund sits at obviously county level. So if you click yes, then it allows us an MHCLG to share this data with your kind of Better Care Fund regional managers at the county level. But other than that, the data would only be used by government and ourselves for reporting and benchmarking, but can be helpful to share with your BCF regional teams so they have a full picture of what's happening without having to get separate information. So that's the end of the guidance on the DFG returns. I'll bring Emily onto the screen in a minute. Let me bring Emily in, who's DFG team lead at MHCLG and has been answering some of the questions in the chat as well. Just going through some of the questions. I think I answered some of these as we were going, but does assessments include all non-DFG referrals not sent in by OT but funded by DFG? Yes, if they came in from another route and they're funded by DFGs, you would include those, Becky. So many grants do not have formal grant application approval. Might need to clarify that one for me, Becky. I'm not quite sure they wouldn't have a grant application or approval date, but perhaps you could clarify that one a little bit. I think I answered this one from Adele that counted as one. I am. Okay. So let's have a look. So Kerry was asking about minor and major adaptations on HRA properties. I think that would be major. Minor ones would, similarly to the way housing associations would deal with those separately. I think they'd be separate from DFGs, and DFG legislation applies in the same way to HRA and council properties as it does to every other tenure. So I think to be consistent, that would be just the major ones. Sue asked the same question, so just the major ones. Becky, in terms of case manager, we've got some queries set up or some reports set up, so send a ticket in and the team will be able to help you with that. Staffing on home adaptations be included in this total spend. So I think if it's kind of, if you've done top slicing that would be equivalent to a fee, yeah, I would include that within your spend. It wouldn't come it wouldn't come under other social care capital, so it's kind of equivalent to a fee. So I would say include that as part of your figures. Does return need to be signed off by the CFO? So Em, what's your view on who do you need it signing off by? And
ideally, we would like the Section 151 officer to have a view, or the CFO. But if you know that the data is correct, then obviously this is a voluntary return. I think the one that we 100% need the Section 151 officers clearance is the declaration. So honestly, if it means it's a barrier to you submitting the information, we'd rather you would submit the information. But if you can get the sign off, that is beneficial, but there's no hard line on that, unfortunately. So I'd rather you use your better judgment and us have the data than not have the data and it get put in a bottleneck of bureaucracy.
Fantastic, thank you. Sam, if you go on the website that was just scrolling down towards the top, you can download a set of the questions. You can have a look at those before you start entering them. Claire's asked for logging on the DFG return. Again, on that page, Claire, there's a contact us email address. Send those details through, and we'll liaise with Emily and the team to get you access to that. Sue has asked about timing. It would have been earlier this year, Sue, but I don't know if you want to say any more. But I think changing to a new system always has issues, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, the declaration has never been, not the declaration, the survey hasn't been in October, the declaration has been in October. So I'm assuming that's probably where the mix-ups come there. But no, it is later than usual, and we do apologise for that. And we generally avoid summer leave, summer holidays at any opportunity. I only joined in April, and also the system changed over in March. So we've all learnt this at the same speed. So I apologise that for the any confusion, how much of a pain it's been, the change in wording. After we've done questions, I'll also do a little bit of I'll cover the reasoning for those. But yes, my main intention is to make sure that we have going forward, consistent questions, ones that you can expect, and also timings that you can expect as well.
Great, thank you. Nigel was asking that previously he was completing the return for two authorities and had the same login. Do you know, under the new system, would he have two logins, or do you know that one would work?
Yeah, so you should have two separate emails per authority that you're allowed to submit for. So you will have to submit two separate returns.
Okay, thank you. And if you're stuck, Nigel, then send us in an email. We'll try and sort that out.
And also, if you know my mum, who also works at Guildford Borough Council, give her away from me. She works in the communities too.
Again, Peter, drop us an email, and we'll do our best to get you connected to the system. So Samara, if it's not on the website yet, the guidance is if you've got the link to the old one, or put the date in of the old one, and then include the new one next year when it's been adopted. So, it has been adopted. Okay. I'll put in the date. I suppose to be adopted, it should really be on your website. Maybe there's a gap between the two, but if it has been formally adopted, then I would say that there is one. But can you leave the link blank? I'm not sure if you can leave the link blank if you say that it has been adopted. But if it allows you to say yes and not put the link in, then do that, I think.
Nigel, I'm just trying to get you a link to our email, and then we can pick that up separately to make sure I get that fixed for you.
Right. We can copy all these comments now, so that we'll pick up any afterwards that we've missed as we've gone through. In terms of male and female, no, I don't know. That's on this year's set, is it? And is there a holding position submission and awaiting financial sign-off stages this year? Do you know, on the new system?
No, but you can save it, and you can wait to submit it. So it's kind of a bit of a similar position in the fact that you can complete, but you don't have to submit. In the same way that you can also go back and change your answers. So it is actually more of a user-friendly system, although it's different. But I'll speak about that in a second.
Okay, so same functionality but different titles, basically. Fantastic. I think the questions have slowed down. So is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I understand that change is frustrating for all, and it was a bit of a shock to me as well. The department has changed their ability and with the platforms that they collect data on, to make sure that the whole department is now consistent, and that is why we've changed to Deliver. It is in the long term, more user friendly. It means that all of your local authorities will be using the same system to complete any returns or official returns that the department asks of you. Um, According to the questions being changed, I know this is also an area of frustration, and I apologise for that. However, it is actually making sure that we align with government accessibility guidance. So that is why we have changed the wording and the questions have changed. I think it would be slightly ironic for us to be in charge of an adaptations and disability grant if we did not follow the accessibility guidance that for government communications we have to abide by. So yes, I'm sorry, there are a few bureaucracy changes that have had to change this year, but one thing that I am striving to do in my role is to make sure that you have more certainty and that we don't chop and change the questions. And these are something that year on year you have certainty. We know what the questions are, you know when they're coming, and also that you've got the support if needed. I also am aware that some of the questions or the number of questions might seem daunting. A lot of that is, if you just don't know the answer, it will skip out some. We want to know as much data as we possibly can for the reasons that we can actually help support you. This year is a massive change for adult social care specifically as well. And the more data and the more evidence, the more justification we've got is to help you and to change policy to make sure that we can help with delivery. And this next couple of years with the Casey review is a really integral point where we can make real change to lots of people's lives and also your lives working and delivering this grant as well. So I'm going to post my team inbox as well into the chat, and I'm happy to pick up conversations. I'm happy to do visits to local authorities, but also I want to say a massive thank you to foundations for their support, and please don't hesitate to reach out to them as well to make sure you're getting the support that you need.
Thank you. Yeah, so if anybody's got any specific questions on the DFG return, it's dfgreturns@foundations.uk.com. Or if you have a more general question, the usual info@foundations.uk.com. So thank you, Em. If anybody's got any other questions afterwards, please do email us in. This video will be been recorded and will be on the website afterwards as well. So if you want to view it back for any assistance with completing the questions, then it'll be available on the page that I showed earlier later. And we're probably going to do another one of these in September, so that if you have any other questions that come up between now and then, once you've got into the system and have started to work through how to answer it, we'll revisit in a future Foundations Live, so we can answer your questions then. Fantastic. Thanks, Em.
Hi, good afternoon, Paul. Oh, thank you, Paul. Sorry, that line was quite a bitty then. But no, thank you very much for having me. And yes, sorry, thank you. Lovely to be with you today. So my name is Samantha Thompson. I am the A&D Marketing Manager at Blum UK. That's just a little piece of what I have been doing. But for most of my working life, I have been a kitchen designer. So 20 plus years I've sat around people's kitchen tables, hearing about how they live, figuring out how to make their space work for them and how to make life generally a little bit easier day to day. And I think that's probably what stayed with me the most. The best designs never started with the cabinetry or the colours or the door fascias. They started ultimately with the person and the individual, not necessarily the diagnosis. So, what do they love doing? How do they live? How do they shop? Do they have children? Do they enjoy cooking? All of these different questions that we would sit down and go through at the kitchen table. And ultimately, what would make tomorrow morning a little bit easier for them as an individual. Now, I know with the audience that I have here, I know many of you assess for adaptations every single day, so I'm not here to tell you how to do that. You are the experts in your role. What I can offer is the designer's side of a conversation. So, what happens between your assessment and the finished kitchen, and where good design specification decisions can make recommendations actually work in practice. So, I'd like to deliberately keep this session grounded in the first principles of kitchen design. Because in my experience personally, when an adapted kitchen fails or any kitchen fails, it's rarely down to the hardware or the cabinetry itself. It's the questions that never got asked. So that's where I'd like to start today. So if I just give you a brief background into Blum UK. So we are probably a global manufacturer of fitted furniture components. We do hinges and drawer boxes to keep it really simple. But the reason I brought that up is that Blum invest heavily in research and development for human behaviour and global trends. So everything for accessible, inclusive design, food waste, micro living, smart technologies. We stay very grounded in understanding our target audience, which helps our research and development teams to develop products and services that fit everyday lifestyles. So, although we do amazing hinges, that's not why I'm here. It is the research and development side of what we do as a company. So having been a designer for many years, I've come to realise that the kitchen can be the most hazardous room in the home for anybody with reduced mobility. And good hardware choices, the reduce strain, prevent falls, delay and avoid care packages at home. And ultimately, my philosophy is designing with ergonomics and anthropometrics in mind. So if we can design for the individual and not just the product that goes in that space, ultimately the design on the back of that should be lifelong. It should cater for an individual for many years to come. So I'd just like to go through some fun facts with you. So real kitchens, real data. Blum have studied people in their homes for over 20 years globally. We've looked at routines, weighed contents, and mapped out how people actually use their kitchens. So I think these stats puts things into perspective a little bit. So we walk on average 264 meters a day in your kitchen. We open the cutlery drawer over 70,000 times in 20 years, and the average person spends 2 hours in their kitchen. I mean, these are a handful of facts. We could look at waste bins. If I was to ask you how many times do you think on average you open your waste bin a day, it's around 50 times a day. And then we look at tableware, plates, glasses, cups in excess of 11 times per day, which equates to 70,000 times in over 20 years. And again, pots and pans twice a day. There's so many different areas of data that I could go through with you. And if anybody's interested in reaching out afterwards for more data, please feel free to do so. But obviously, when we look at a space, when we look at a kitchen, actually stating down facts and figures to how many times we actually do something on average, it's quite incredible how many times we need to do that as individuals. So here, I just want to look at, sorry, my thing's frozen. Is it later? Here it is, sorry. So when we look at designing kitchens, a successful adapted kitchen answers a longer list of questions. And again, it's probably questions that you ask anyway within your daily role. Can they move around it? Can they reach what they need? I've seen many kitchens designed with standard cupboards where the top sides of that we can't access. And again, the cupboards at the bottom, 20% of those cupboards underneath at 590 high are inaccessible. And I only know that from personal experience as well. I think just daily factors in life. We all know we're kind of one diagnosis or one incident away from being able to use our kitchen functionally, and any room in the house for that matter. So can they use the appliances? Is there enough room to prepare food between the cooking and the sink area? Can they do things independently? If not, do we move things closer together? There's so many different elements and questions to ask, and as opposed to can they just get into it and move around that particular space. So understanding the person before drawing the kitchen, this is where design matters more than anything else. And having been a designer and drawing on my past experience as a kitchen designer, I was probably guilty of not doing that in the first instance. And it's only over time and over years that actually a standard kitchen, whether adapted or standard, are we asking the right questions? How do they use their kitchen? Do they batch cook? Do we need more room or freezer room for batch cooking? Do we need more storage space for Tupperware boxes? What's in reach to that particular person? We're all different heights. Can one person reach that space at the top? Do they require a step to do so? Can they bend down far enough to be able to access the toaster machine that probably gets pulled out once or twice a year? What movements are difficult for that person? Is walking a problem? Are they arthritic in their hands? And what can they do independently? Are they standing, seated, or using a wheelchair? Or do they fatigue easily? Do we need a prop area where we kind of prop ourselves up, or just perch a little one single stool in the kitchen somewhere for somebody that is easily fatigued? What equipment do they use every day, whether that's medical equipment or whether that's food prepping equipment, and who else uses that particular space with them? So it's just kind of looking at lifestyles and cooking habits, shopping habits, etc. That I think is quite important when considering conversation. So designing for people and not just the standards. As we all know, our bodies do change over time, and cabinetry usually doesn't. So good design closes the gap for that. Cabinetry will be cabinetry. A cab is a cab, 18mm standard MFC usually, and we'll have an array of fascias on top of that. It's what's inside that and what's making that accessible for that particular person. When we look at wall cupboards, can we specify lift-ups with assisted opening, just as a one option, or internal pull-out fittings, avoiding corner units with the dead zones that we do get in there. And then push to open drawers, something that you just push to open, whether that's on one drawer or all of them. Just having it on one would make that a little bit easier for that particular person. And you'll see on that image on there as well, there is a pull-out step, which again just makes the top of that unit a little bit more accessible, and you get more storage in the bottom. There are so many different things on the market these days to utilise storage, but make that storage accessible for everybody. So here I just wanted to kind of give you a bit of a side-by-side with that. You can see two different images. Both have the same concept, one kitchen having two sets of needs. Now, when we're looking at that space, it's very easy to assume and have a look at that thinking that is catered for a wheelchair user, but actually anybody can use that space. There is a space to the right hand side on the left hand image where the wheelchair user can get their legs underneath, but then also the gentleman can sit down and prep or stand next to the lady and prepare food together. There's pull out space or space towel, pull out drawers, ultimately where everything comes to you, pull out bin so it comes to you. We have an eye level oven. All too many times I see ovens built under, especially in contract and development projects. But having an oven at eye level, I know NEF do a slide and hide oven, as I'm sure there are more out there on the market. But just having an oven at eye level, maybe with a shelf underneath to be able to get anything hot out of there comfortably, and making those particular spaces accessible for everybody. Sorry, I'm clicking on the wrong. I've not used this platform before. Bear with me. Sorry. So I just like to go into the decisions that do work, and they're very small, cost-effective decisions, really. So thinking about work surface height, I think I know the standard plinth height is 150 mil when it comes to designing kitchens. That is the standard, because I suppose the industry that I work in is standardised everything. So we look at height now. 150, yes, it's the standard, but a comfortable working height is 10 to 15 centimetres below the level of a bent elbow. And that makes a big difference, I think, when cooking, prepping, cleaning. Anybody with reduced shoulder mobility, arm mobility, just looking at the worktop height can make a big difference to the comfort and ease as to how we design that space. Different working positions, storage and reach zones, we kind of covered this a little bit earlier on, but just thinking about where that individual can reach comfortably. Everywhere that we design, we put that into 3 different categories, and that was a little bit further up into the slide. I should have added that here, I do apologise. But everywhere kind of hip level is where we keep our everyday things. Every day we kind of we get things at ease. So whether it's your cutlery, your cups are on the worktop, tea, coffee, sugar, everything is within accessible reach and distance, and that's just human habit. And then we look at things that we don't use so often, maybe that we would hide in that corner cabinet, like the toaster machine or the crock pot, or something that we get out every now and again. So it's just making sure that everything is accessible, nothing is hidden, and we can reach those awkward areas, and avoiding unnecessary bending. And again, decisions that do work, appliances, positioning and access, ensuring it's eye level. Similarly to a dishwasher, we often as designers design them at floor level, just to go above the plinth. Raising that slightly could make that a little bit easier on the user that's in that kitchen all day, every day. Controls and mechanisms. Do we struggle with touch control? Do we need knobs? How is that oven functioning? Is it buttons? And having worked with elderly community, sometimes the touch sensors are not ideal. And again, the grip on the knobs can be quite difficult, so there's a fine balance with those as well. The hob, is that accessible? What's the difference between the sink and the hob? Are they walking across the other side of their kitchen with a hot pan? And how does that look in everyday life? Do they have children? Do they have pets? Do they have a walk through to a utility? How much easier could we make that crossover? Can we put the sink next to the hob, obviously with the clearance, but rather than the opposite side of the kitchen? Sinks, again, approach and knee clearance, tap operation? Are there levers? Is it monoblock? Are they fully twists? Are they touch control? Because that will all depend on the individual using them and the barriers that they're up against in having that space comfortable and operational. And circulation within that is important. Turning space and door swings, appliance and drawer clearances, and supporting multiple users. So I suppose the biggest one, or the first thing, is a full 1500 turning circle is textbook ideal with wheelchair access, but it's not always the workable answer. So a few things I'd look at before assuming it can't be done is, does the person need to turn 180 degrees in that kitchen, or can the layout let them come in, work in line and reverse out? It's not ideal, but when we're working within a given space, sometimes we have to work with what we've got. And then putting knee space recesses under a sink or hob can effectively extend the manoeuvring space without extending the room. And again, pocket doors, when we look at pocket doors, if we want to hide it away, it can be completely hidden, but then it can be fully opened and retracted, and everything is there and accessible without doors on. So you don't risk the problem with drawers coming out and then having no space behind it or to the side of it. That would be another option. So the door swings eat more circulation and space than people would probably expect. So if we can do things that doesn't involve a structural conversation sometimes, it can be a hardware one. So absorbing a utility cupboard or moving a stud wall obviously is something, a conversation that happens later down the line. It's not always a conversation that we need to have up front. There's always options there. And just designing kitchens around people and not assumptions. So aesthetics, choice and personal identity. I prefer to believe that these shouldn't be add-ons or I suppose that the word inclusive or accessible is often tied to being clinical and clean and white and grey and not full of fun. But they have a choice with aesthetics, and they have a choice as to what goes into those spaces. It's not about making everything accessible. I understand there's grants in place and there's budgets and constraints there, but just one choice of maybe moving the oven up to eye level would help the cooking process a lot more. Trying to remove personal identity, taking consideration family life and socialising. A kitchen is a space, it's moved on an awful lot from when I first started my career over 20 years ago. It was just a space for cooking. Now it tends to be the space of laughter and homework and baking together and work calls, Teams calls. There's so many things that happen in the space. It's not just about storing pasta and cooking food anymore. There's a lot more to it. So just to see how Blum fits into the wider adaptation ecosystem. So the products are DFG compatible. There's a lot of evidence-based studies, and we do offer CPD programs for any of that are interested. We run them regularly, webinar-based or in person. So if you'd like to know more about any of our CPDs or studies that we've done, please feel free to reach out. All products are easy for contractors to work with. There's no specialist tools required, as with any hardware. And there is full specifier support and technical guidance from ourselves at every stage of the project. And just to make you aware that after this session, as I said, we have everything available for you: design resources, CPD opportunities, technical guidance, and templates and checklists, if those are of interest to anybody. Thank you all very much. I say that was just a really back to basic principles overview. But if anybody has any questions or would like to get in touch, please feel free to do so. Thank you, Paul. We have, yes. Yeah, that runs from Ageing in Place. as well as from an accessible perspective as well. So if anybody would like to reach out, please feel free to do so, and we can get that scheduled for you. I will do. Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul.
Hi, I've never used this platform before. Sorry, so I was actually not realizing that I already put myself on off camera. Ideally, we would like the Section 151 officer to have a view, or the CFO. But if you know that the data is correct, then obviously this is a um, voluntary return. I think the one that we 100% need, the Section 151 officers clearance, is the declaration. So honestly, if it means it's a barrier to you submitting the information, we'd rather you would submit the information. But if you can get the sign off, that is beneficial, but there's no hard line on that, unfortunately. So I'd rather you use your better judgment and us have the data than not have the data and it get put in a bottleneck of bureaucracy. Uh, Yeah, well, the declaration has never been, not the declaration, the survey hasn't been in October. The declaration has been in October. So I'm assuming that's probably where the mix ups come there. But no, it is later than usual, and we do apologise for that. And we generally avoid summer leave, summer holidays at any opportunity. Um, I only joined in April, and also the system changed over in March. So we've all learnt this at the same speed. So I apologise that for the any confusion, how much of a pain it's been, the change in wording. After we've done questions, I'll also do a little bit of I'll cover the reasoning for those. But yes, my main intention is to make sure that we have, going forward, consistent questions, ones that you can expect, and also timings that you can expect as well. Yeah, so you should have two separate emails per authority that you're allowed to submit for. So you will have to submit two separate returns. And also, if you know my mum, who also works at Guildford Borough Council, give her away from me. She works in the communities team. Nigel, I'm just trying to get you a link to our email, and then we can pick that up separately to make sure I get that fixed for you. No, but you can save it and you can wait to submit it. So it's kind of a bit of a similar position in the fact that you can complete, but you don't have to submit. In the same way that you can also go back and change your answers. So it is actually more of a user-friendly system, although it's different. But I'll speak about that in a second. Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to add that I understand that change is frustrating for all, and it was a bit of a shock to me as well. The department has changed their ability and with the platforms that they collect data on, so to make sure that the whole department is now consistent, and that is why we've changed to deliver. It is in the long term more user friendly. It means that all of your local authorities will be using the same system to complete any returns or official returns that the department asks of you. Um, According to the questions being changed, I know this is also an area of frustration, and I apologise for that. However, it is actually making sure that we align with government accessibility guidance. So that is why we have changed the wording and the questions have changed. I think it would be slightly ironic for us to be in charge of an adaptations and disability grant if we did not follow the accessibility guidance that for government communications we have to abide by. So yes, I'm sorry, there are a few bureaucracy changes that have had to change this year, but one thing that I am striving to do in my role is to make sure that you have more certainty and that we don't chop and change the questions. And these are something that year on year you have certainty. We know what the questions are, you know when they're coming, and also that you've got the support if needed. I also am aware that some of the questions or the number of questions might seem daunting. A lot of that is, if you just don't know the answer, it will skip out some. We want to know as much data as we possibly can for the reasons that we can actually help support you. This year is a massive change for adult social care specifically as well. And the more data and the more evidence, the more justification we've got is to help you and to change policy to make sure that we can help with delivery. And this next couple of years with the Casey review is a really integral point where we can make real change to lots of people's lives and also your lives working and delivering this grant as well. So I'm going to post my team inbox as well into the chat, and I'm happy to pick up conversations. I'm happy to do visits to local authorities, but also I want to say a massive thank you to foundations for their support, and please don't hesitate to reach out to them as well to make sure you're getting the support that you need. Thank you.